Good evening, I'm Maria Rodriguez Zabalde. Welcome to Headlines. Reports suggest that a deal between Hamas and Israel has never been closer, but we saw this scenario while several previous attempts to reach a ceasefire in Gaza have failed, but this time around it may be different. To talk about it, we have with us our guest, Adnan Nasser, American Lebanese journalist from Lebanon. Mr. Nasser, at the moment we have two U.S. administrations involved in the process at the same time. Biden's administration, who is seeking forward legacy, and then we have Trump, who is really involved in the details of the negotiation. How will this situation affect to the possible deal?
Look, I think the reality on the ground has changed considerably, regardless of who is going to have the advantage, right? Whether President Biden or President-elect Donald Trump. You have to remember something. The Israelis have never been closer to a deal because they've never been closer to a military victory. Had they made a deal to negotiate the release of the hostages 6 months into the war, and then they would offer a ceasefire in return, you would have Netanyahu telling his people that Hamas is still in charge of Gaza, you would still have Hezbollah in a position of strength, and you would still have Bashar al-Assad as president of Syria. So really the circumstances in the region have changed in Israel's favor.
Mr. Nasser, Donald Trump said that he wants a Gaza ceasefire deal by the time he takes power. Do you think that is possible?
I think so. It's in everyone's interest to do so. First and foremost, the people of Palestine and Gaza and the people of Israel and everyone else in the region. President-elect Donald Trump wants to be seen as the man that, quote, ended wars, America's foreign wars, not just in the Middle East, but also in Ukraine. So this is to his own political advantage to have a ceasefire before he enters office. And he will more than likely pressure Netanyahu or offered Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu incentives to agree to a ceasefire. More likely, he will offer Prime Minister Netanyahu a deal that would include strengthening Israel's capability to strike Iran, or he would offer Netanyahu a deal where if they want to fight Iran in the foreseeable future, if Iran doesn't play ball on the nuclear issue, that would probably get Netanyahu to be more flexible on negotiating a ceasefire in Gaza.
About the flexibility in the balance of power has shifted into Israel, and probably this time they need to cut a deal while meeting the minimum demand of the Palestinians. Why do Hamas still fighting?
Well, Hamas needs to show that they haven't been fully defeated on the ground yet, despite them losing all of their, political leaders and even their military leaders. Of course, Yahya Sinwar, who was assassinated by the Israelis in Gaza. Hamas does not want to lose face. They want to be able to tell their people, despite all the considerable hardships that you have suffered, we never gave up. We never surrendered our arms to the Israelis. I'm speaking for what Hamas would say to their people. But more than likely, any deal that will be cut will significantly reduce Hamas's political authority in Gaza, and more than likely they will have to hand over their weapons to the Palestinian Authority that governs the West Bank, or governs in cooperation with the Israelis. So I don't see this as a victory for Hamas, but definitely they want to show face to the people.
Mm-hmm. We cannot forget, Mr. Nasser, the Houthis in Yemen. Netanyahu already said that Israel is ready to finish with them, and also he has launched threats against Iran. Are those ones Israel's next steps?
I don't doubt that the Israelis, in particular Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, would like to assassinate the top figures of the Houthis in Yemen. Remember, the Houthis have played the role of a nuisance. They fired what they call ballistic missiles. These aren't really ballistic missiles. Military experts would probably point to you and say they're not ballistic missiles. But they have reached the central parts of Israel, and they have caused casualties in the past. So Netanyahu and the far right and the military of Israel would like to have done with the Houthis Can they actually achieve that? Hardly, because it's a big country, Yemen, and the Houthis are a guerrilla force. And they would have to invade Yemen or have troops on the ground. They cannot just bomb the Houthis from the air. The Saudis have been doing that for years, and there hasn't shown any chance of success. I think this is just the Israelis, using rhetoric to try to win up support domestically, and there may be some truth. I think more than likely we see assassinations of Houthi leaders in the future, but not the destruction of the movement itself.
It seems in this latest round of talks also comes as Hamas has shown a greater degree of flexibility following the weakening of allies, let's say Hezbollah in Lebanon and Bashar al-Assad in Syria, both backed by Iran. Is this one the main reason?
This is a main reason, and I don't agree that Bashar al-Assad was an ally of Hamas by the end of his rule in Syria. Remember, he wasn't firing a shot into Israel or really allowing lots of military activity that would threaten Israel from the Golan Heights, the Syrian-occupied Golan Heights. The Israelis occupy it. And Bashar al-Assad was keeping that border as quiet as possible, more to appease his Arab partners, specifically United Arab Emirates, so that he could receive reconstruction money. Now that situation has completely changed. To go back to your original question, Hamas has shown flexibility, one, because its allies have suffered considerable losses, significant losses. They have maintained, at least in rhetoric, willingness to continue supporting Hamas. But militarily, there's just nothing that they can do at this point.
Also, Mr. Nasser, at the first phase of the through Hamas will release about 30 captives. At this point, do you think, honestly, more of the hostages still alive, considering not having news about them during the last months?
As far as I'm aware, a number of hostages have been killed in Hamas captivity. It's quite possible, and I'm confident that many of them are still alive, but I think the Israelis are preparing more funerals for these hostages than they would like to.
Israel is keeping up its attacks across the Gaza Strip, including hospital. So even the image coming from the field, they have more targets, of course. So without deal, we can suspect that the war continues, right?
It will continue, but the chances of it closing with a ceasefire before President Biden leaves office is high.
Well, thanks, Mr. Adnan Nasser, American-Lebanese journalist from Lebanon, for being with us and for your comments. Hope to talk with you very soon. You can also get latest news around the clock on our website, AnewZ.tv. Thank you for watching. We wish you a good evening ahead.